Title: The Cloak of Stillness. Year: 187,500,000. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Naros was not split by walls, but by silence. East of the river, neon flickered over glass towers and both moved like breathless wind. West of the river, shadows sprawled across crumbling stone, and families lived 6 to a room. There were no patrols, no hearings, only rumor, and the rumor always ended in the same name: the Cloak of Stillness. No one saw her coming. She didn't wear black or creep in shadows. She walked through markets like a ghost in plain clothes. Her gaze so quiet it silenced arguments. Where corruption calcified, she dissolved it. Where grudges festered, she whispered to vendettas. They said she was more myth than woman, until the scarred envoy arrived. His face was half mask, half memory. A diplomat once burned in a peace summit gone wrong. He had wandered 23 cities with nothing but parchment, scars, and vowed never to raise his voice. When he stepped into Naros, he didn't seek the cloak to stop her. He sought her to learn. The true path does not reveal itself, he said at the river's edge. It must be earned step by step. Chapter 2. Naros was preparing for the convergence, a rare meeting of syndicates, elders, and exiles, hosted once a decade to avoid all-out war. The cloak was expected to disrupt it. The envoy offered to mediate. They met in a tea-house built from broken doors. She poured without asking. He drank without flinching. "You want peace?" she asked. "I want understanding," he replied. "Peace follows if it's honest." She studied him. "You think you're neutral." "I know I'm flawed," he said. Silence. Then she handed him a scroll sealed in wax shaped like a broken eye. "Deliver this to the Syndicate of Ash." He nodded and left without opening it. Along the way, he was stopped twice by thieves, once by a child pretending to beg. He shared food with one, offered silence to another, and gave the child a page from his own journal. At the gates of the Syndicate, he bled from a shallow knife wound and still smiled. They let him through. The message inside: a single phrase: empathy is stronger than leverage. Chapter 3. The convergence began. Whispers filled the dome of memory. The Cloak of Stillness stood before all sides, not as an assassin or rebel, but as a witness. She unveiled testimonies, recordings of betrayals, acts of mercy, background kindnesses that saved lives when no one was watching. And in every story, one thread wove through: the scarred envoy's steps. He had softened lines, asked questions no one dared, brought silence where noise reigned. The syndicates paused. The elders listened. The exiles returned, not with weapons, but with maps of hope. Naros didn't unite overnight, but it stopped bleeding. And at the river's edge, where once silence divided, a monument rose not of steel or stone, but of words etched into water. A true path does not reveal itself. It must be earned step by step. And beneath it, the cloak still walks. The envoy still listens, and Naros breathes. Together. Title: A Mistake of Recovery. Year: 187,179,486.7. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. At the edge of the verdant ring, where city and forest met in a blur of vines and glass, stood the library of the unspoken. It was not made of stone, but of memory, walls embedded with moments too raw to record, and floors that echoed the quiet truths people dared not write. In its center sat the teacher who forgets nothing. He was not ancient, but his eyes bore the weight of many yesterdays. His name had once rung in the council halls of 5 nations. Now he tended books that changed titles depending on the reader's pain. Every morning the young girl visited, curious, stubborn, loud. She called herself the Dreamtide Shepherd. Her gift was empathy. Her curse, remembering the dreams of others but forgetting her own. She wanted to lead. He wanted to stop teaching. But in her questions he found a reason, and in his silence she found a challenge. Chapter 2. He taught her how to read silence, how to decipher pain not by what was said, but by what was avoided. She responded by bringing children from the lower districts, leading impromptu story sessions that turned scars into lessons and gossip into fables. The council called it rebellion. The teacher called it leadership. "You'll break them," he warned one day. "Maybe," she said, "but I'll be with them when they rise again." She asked him why he'd withdrawn from public life. He showed her his past visions stored in memory, past failures, all of them, missions gone wrong, decisions that led to betrayals, friendships lost to stubborn pride. "I am not what they need," he said. She knelt and placed her hands on the shards. "Your foundation is not your perfection, it is the mistake of your broken recoveries." Chapter 3. The council summoned them both. They demanded silence. The teacher stood to speak, and then stepped aside. The Dreamtide Shepherd told her story, not with pride, but with cracks. She shared her forgotten dreams, her wrong guesses, her hopes stitched together from failures, and the crowded lot chair. They stood, they listened, they wept, and when the council tried to interject, no one turned. The library of the unspoken gained a new wing that year, carved by the hands of those once silenced. At its entrance, 2 statues, a man with his hand on a book, a girl with her hand on her heart. Between them, etched deep into living bark, your foundation is not your perfection, it is the mosaic of your broken recoveries. And in smaller print, barely visible unless you knelt to see, all true leaders were once lost students. Title: The Oracle in Reverse. Year 186,974.3. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. They called it the Severance Line. The border carved not by war, but by fear dividing East Lithuania and West. No wall, no guards, just a strip of scorched earth where technology failed and whispers echoed. They said anyone who crossed would lose their name, but names were already fading. In East Lithuania, logic reigned, cold systems and cooler civics. In West, ritual and dream-shaped society. Communication had become a contest of superiority. Entered the Oracle in Reverse. Once a famed diplomat, she had spoken too many truths to the wrong ears, and been cursed by both sides. Her voice now bent time backward. Each word she uttered heard as an echo before it was spoken. People said she was mad. She said she was finished explaining. She lived on the Severance Line and listened. The scarred envoy found her there. He had survived both sides. His body bore the price. Chapter 2. They sat by a rusted fountain and exchanged no pleasantries. "Why come?" she asked, her voice drifting before her lips moved. "Because no one listens anymore," he replied. "Not even to themselves." She handed him a shard of obsidian. "Look, speak what you wish others would say to you." He saw himself begging for forgiveness, and yelling, and weeping. The shard remained silent. She nodded. Truth waits until silence is strong enough to carry it. They began gathering others. A mute child who wrote nightmares that later came true. An elder who only spoke in questions. A programmer who coded empathy into surveillance drones. Each had crossed without permission. Each began building a bridge of understanding, not of planks, but of shared stories. Chapter 3. The Ministry of Order denounced them. The Council of Ritual called it heresy. But the bridge stood. People from both sides came not for trade or treaties, but to listen, to confess, to unlearn. One night, a zealot approached with a blade meant for the envoy. The oracle stepped between them. She did not speak. She walked away. The zealot lowered his blade and wept. Sometimes courage looks like walking away before the blade is drawn. The Severance Line became the oracle's garden, not of plants, but of pauses. Each visitor brought something unsaid. Each left lighter. And at the garden's entrance, carved into the blackened soil, sometimes courage looks like walking away before the blade is drawn. And beneath it, you are the bridge. Title: The Voice Under Ice. Here, 186,538,461.1. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Bureau of Dreams had ruled. No dream over 7 seconds. No recordings of ancestral memories. And under no circumstances were dreamers allowed to share their dreams with others while conscious. The Archivist of Dreams, whose office was buried beneath 24 floors of bureaucracy and polite suppression, obeyed all of these rules, except when she didn't. She catalogued banned dreams under coded names like toes that spoke truth with a sneeze that ended tyranny. Most of her notes were jokes wrapped in brilliance, except for one file: The Voice Under Ice. It was no joke. It was a warning. The dream kept appearing in fragmented shards across different people, a voice echoing from beneath frozen oceans, whispering the same phrase: "You're breaking to become." At first, she flagged it as a neural loop. Then she started hearing it, too, and that's when the satire began. Chapter 2. She leaked the voice into pop music. She buried it in breakfast cereal jingles. She ensured every member of the department for neural normalcy hummed it unknowingly while brushing their teeth. And she sought out the dreamers behind it. The first was a chef who wept whenever he cracked an egg. The second, a child who doodled spirals that melted when touched. The third was the voice itself, a person buried in ice. Not literally, but by a society too numb to feel their own thaw. The archivist found them working as a janitor in the dream burial sector. They didn't speak. They listened, and then they left. Helping others, they said softly, was the only way I remembered myself. And, she asked, and I think I'm ready to be heard. Chapter 3. The Bureau caught wind. They summoned her. She wore a gown stitched from shredded memos and smiled as they read her charges. Unauthorized dream sharing. Instigating collective empathy. Satirical subversion. Guilty, she said. All of it. Before they could sentence her, every bureau screen flickered. The voice under ice echoed across every department, not in words, in sighs, and apologies long held, and laughter that remembered pain, then silence. And in that stillness, the bureau cracked. Its walls didn't fall, but its doors stayed open. Dreams were no longer buried, they were planted. The archivist returned to her office and added one final entry to the classified files. The fewest victories rise from the battles you nearly lost. And beneath it, sometimes saving yourself begins by helping someone else fall first. Title: The Lion's Whisper. Year: 186,217,948.6. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Erikath bore the scars of a long-forgotten rebellion. Streets still bowed around the blast sites. Statues stood half-mended, honoring heroes no child could name. Forgiveness had been declared from the high tower, but it had never truly reached the ground. In the poorest quarter lived a boy named Kale, raised by stories his grandmother told of a man called the Puzzle-Hearted One, so named because his chest bore the etchings of every person he had forgiven. They said the man had once silenced a lion with a whisper. Now, as the city prepared for the Centennial Forgiveness Festival, Kale's district was to be raised for beautification. His school, his home, his grandmother's mural all condemned. The city had forgiven its past, but not its present. Chapter 2. Kale stole into the archive of touched names, where records of the rebellion were sealed beneath bureaucratic dust. There he met a woman who wore no shoes and carried an inkless pen. The Puzzle-Hearted One's last descendant. Why did he forgive? Kale asked. Because fire doesn't just destroy, she replied. It purifies. She gave him a single whisper, passed down through generations. It wasn't in words. It was a sound that reached beneath memory. Armed with it, Kale climbed the tower during the festival. He found the mayor rehearsing her speech beside a gilded flame meant to symbolize unity, but cold to the touch. Kale whispered. The fire roared and turned gold. Chapter 3. The whisper awakened the tower's old mechanisms, bells that hadn't rung in a century, shutters that hadn't opened in decades. And voices returned. People came forth with stories of silenced loss, unacknowledged pain, unresolved bravery. The festival unraveled. In its place bloomed something new. A reckoning born not of shame, but truth. Kale's district was spared not by decree, but by demand. The Puzzle-Hearted One's name was etched into the foundation of a new library built where the old municipal office once stood. Inside, a flame burned, not eternal, but real, warm. On the wall above it, a plaque. Forgiveness demands fire, but it is the only fire that purifies. And beneath it, whisper the truth, even if it roars. Title: The Song Without Source. Year: 185,897,435.5. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Academy of Precise Silence had perfected information. They tracked thoughts before they were spoken, captured intentions in the heat of breath, and archived every moral debate in a crystalline vault known as the empathic null. Empathy, they said, clouded truth. Emotion, they said, was error. And so their agents moved like wind through steel corridors, flawless, wordless, and untouched by the burdens of feeling. All except one, the sleepless midwife. She had once served in the field of first insight, where children born with memory carried the histories of ancestors. She had learned to deliver not just bodies but legacies. But when the Academy demanded she sever those memories for the sake of clarity, she refused. So they reassigned her. Now she carried secrets no one wanted, and truths no one could feel, until the song appeared. Chapter 2. It had no source, no author, just a melody that wound itself into dreams and lingered in the silence after hard questions. The Academy traced its pattern, deciphered its intervals, broke it down to math. Still, they couldn't stop it, because it didn't carry knowledge. It carried pain and connection. They suspected a traitor. She knew better. The song wasn't treason. It was memory of returning home. She traced its origin to a former vault technician, a boy who had lost his mother in a cleansing and had begun humming the lullaby she once sang when no one else was listening. He didn't remember its words, just the feeling. She sat beside him and hummed the harmony. Chapter 3. They were arrested the next morning, charged with emotional subterfuge and unauthorized resonance. The midwife did not resist, but the song spread. Agents began hesitating before raids. Vaults opened to reveal histories that hurt too deeply to quantify. And then the head instructor collapsed, weeping in the central square, clutching a letter he hadn't written, but remembered receiving. A mother's final message. Empathy had returned, not as weakness, as warning. The Academy didn't dissolve. It transformed. Students now trained not only in facts, but in context, in memory, in mercy, and beneath the hall of Null the chamber remains sealed, not with locks, but with silence. Inside, the song plays endlessly, its name now etched above the door. Some days, showing up is the holiest act of all, and beneath it, knowledge teaches, but only empathy saves. Title: The Riddle Master. Year: 185,576,922.9. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Before the uprising, the city of Theron was known for its riddles. Every agreement, every law, every bond began not with signatures but with puzzles. They believed that anything understood too easily could be misused too quickly. But when war came, the riddles stopped. What followed was order, cold, precise, unquestioned. Into this silence returned the riddle master. She had been presumed dead, lost in the collapse of the northern spires. Yet here she was older, quieter, and carrying a staff carved with unanswered questions. With her came stories, not proclamations. Children gathered at her feet to hear old riddles retold, not for amusement, but for meaning. Adults began to ask one another, what did we leave behind in our rush to survive? It was in one of these gatherings that a boy asked the question that started everything. What legacy do we leave if we forget how to wonder? Chapter 2. The Riddle Master walked the old roads to the Tower of Remnants, where records of pre-war creativity had been sealed under cultural containment. She carried only a lamp and the boy's question. Inside, she met resistance, a custodian who believed in the safety of ignorance. They debated not with swords, but riddles. If truth can divide, he asked. Why not bury it? She answered, because roots bury too long rot instead of grow. He let her pass. She emerged with scrolls, sketches, forgotten lullabies, and the blueprints of the flame unfinished, a torch designed to burn, not to destroy, but to illuminate contradiction. They rebuilt it together. A fire that revealed not what was, but what could still be. Chapter 3. On the night of the Legacy Festival, the flame unfinished was lit. It cast no shadows. Instead, it revealed images on the stones of the plaza, pictures of ancestors smiling, laughing, dreaming, failing, trying again. The people wept, not out of grief, but relief. They had not lost their past, they had merely stopped asking for it. The Riddle Master left before dawn. No one saw her go, but the staff remained planted in the ground beside the flame. Its top burned softly, never consumed, and next to it, etched in gold, to confront fears, to reclaim a piece of your freedom. And beneath it, wonder is the first heirloom of a just world. Title: The Breath Before the Dawn. Year: 185,256,409.8. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Below the frost-lapped ruins of Kether's Reach, a sickness spread not of the body, but of spirit. Plague of the Possible, they called it. It infected belief, unraveling conviction thread by thread until action itself seemed meaningless. People stopped trying, stopped caring, stopped dreaming. Into this quiet collapse came the ice whisper. She moved like wind over snow, silent and cutting, cloaked in frost-woven silk. Her voice could still storms or summon them. She didn't promise miracles. She offered only presence. Where her shadow passed, people remembered their names. But she was not enough, not alone. From the southern caves emerged a figure covered in ash and mirror shards. The Plague of the Possible, once a philosopher king who had seen every future and despaired at them all. His gift had become a curse, each vision more hopeless than the last. He walked with no destination until he saw her, and she didn't flinch. Chapter 2. They spoke little. Words weren't useful at first. He tested her, showing her a future where her efforts failed, another where her name was used to justify cruelty, a third where she was forgotten. She stood firm. It doesn't matter if I'm remembered, she said. Only that I lived by what matters. She built fires in the center of town squares and invited people to sit, not to be healed, but to remember each other. She asked no one to confess. She only asked them to show up again tomorrow. And they did. The Plague of the Possible watched and wept. The community began to change. Food was shared without tally. Walls were repainted with stories, not orders. Children were wrote lullabies with endings they chose themselves. The Plague, once a whisper of futility, found no hold, not in presence, not in kindness, not in the cold, where hearts now warmed together. Chapter 3. One night, a storm approached so vast it swallowed the stars. The people panicked. The Plague knelt beside the ice whisperer. We could leave. You've done enough. She looked to the dark sky, then to the crowd, and shook her head. We've only just begun. They moved together side by side, door to door, reminding the people, you are not alone. They lit lanterns in windows. They sang songs with no words. And when the storm came, it found the city already awake. The winds raged, but no roofs flew. The cold bit, but no fires died. And in the center of it all stood the ice whisperer, cloaked in frostlight. When dawn finally broke, the snow revealed a message etched in packed earth. The blackest night is not your ending, it's the breath before the dawn. The plague of the possible dropped his mirrors and began planting seeds, not of warning, but of hope. Title: The Bone Singer. Year: 184,935,000. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The high hold of Darethorn was carved into the side of a cliff, each level a testament to its people's resilience and to the truths they refused to speak. They had built a kingdom of silence, not out of malice, but shame. No one spoke of the Bone Court, not since the reckoning, but every night someone heard the singing, soft, haunting, unrelenting. The Bone Singer, they called her, a myth to frighten children, a ghost in the marble veins of the citadel. Yet when the city's reservoir dried, and when food spoiled in transit, and when the king's ear collapsed with no wound visible, the myth was summoned, not by scholars, by the whisper that endures, a man who remembered every secret ever entrusted to him, and bore their weight in a coat stitched from letters never sent. He sought the Bone Singer not to silence her, but to listen. Chapter 2. They met beneath the city in the ossuary caverns, where bones were stacked by story, not size. The Bone Singer wore no mask, but her face was veiled in sorrow. "I do not punish," she said. "I echo." Each song she sang was a confession. Each note summoned a truth long buried by pride. The whisper that endures asked her to sing of the king. She sang of betrayal, of bribes, of verdicts passed before trials began. The mountain shook. The king denied it all, but the people had heard, not the lyrics, the tone, and that was enough. Chapter 3. The king fled. The air awoke memory wiped, but heart newly stirred. The Bone Singer stood before the people and asked a single question: "Were you still hiding?" One by one they answered, in stories, in songs, in silence finally broken. The highhold was rebuilt not in stone, but in trust. Each citizen contributed not currency, but confession errors owned, harm amended. The whisper that endures became a new archivist, not of facts, but of voices living truths. And beneath the central arch of the new plaza, carved deep into the stone, your greatest weakness is the part of you you hide the most. And beneath it, let it be seen, let it be sung. Title: The Echo of Creation. Year: 184,615,384.2. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the Valley of Corinth, where sound once birthed stone and every sound carried weight, silence had become a prison. The wars had ended, but nothing grew. People lived by repetition, ritual without heart, speech without song. They feared what change might cost, and so they sang no more, until a single voice returned, the echo of creation, long thought to have vanished with the collapse of the harmonic accord, stepped into the valley's center with nothing but a threadbare cloak and a staff carved from skywood. With her came melody. She didn't speak of revolution. She sang no sunrise. She didn't demand change. She hummed potential into the cracks of the earth. The boundless listener heard her before he saw her, a cartographer of emotion and silence. He recorded not maps of land, but of longing. He had charted apathy in its many forms. Now he traced hope. He approached the echo with hesitation, and she smiled. "The world reshapes around those who move with purpose," she sang. He nodded and followed. Chapter 2. Together they walked the dormant streets of Corinth. She sang in doorways, and vines unfurled. He listened at thresholds, and silence softened. Where her voice was raw, he offered rhythm. Where her path shook, he steadied. The love was not spoken. It wove between their footsteps, quiet and sure. In the central plaza, the council of stillness gathered to confront them. "We have peace," they said. "You have pause," she replied. The boundless listener spoke. "Peace without movement is stasis. You can do better. We fear what change will destroy." "And I," she said, "sing of what it will make." Then she sang the song of stone again, a melody thought lost, and the valley shook, not in warning, in response. Chapter 3. Walls softened into gardens. Dormant aquifers awoke with laughter. A child who had never cried before wept at the sound and then laughed. Change spread, not like wildfire, but like roots beneath frost. The council suspended not in defeat, but in relief, and the people sang again awkwardly, earnestly, in wrong keys and perfect spirit. The echo and the listener didn't stay. They moved on, hand in hand, seeking other places where silence had settled too deep. But in Corinth, a statue now stands in the plaza, simple, unadorned, of two figures in motion. Beneath it, etched into the stone, the world reshapes around those who move with purpose. And beside it, in softer script, she sang. He listened, and the valley awakened. Title: The Oracle. Year: 184,194,171.5. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. At the edge of the Singing Woods stood a hollow tree no one dared approach. They said it was cursed, that it wept at midnight, that creatures once gentle became savage near its roots. The villagers of Marne avoided it, save for the root binder, an old woman who spoke to vines and walked with wolves. He claimed a spirit lived inside the tree, one who once healed, but now grieved, one who was wounded, not wicked. The children called it the Oracle, the elders called it dangerous. One night, a hunter returned from the forest, eyes vacant, voice gone. At his feet lay the body of a doe, untouched by wounds, yet unmoving. The root binder wept. "It's begun," she whispered. "The Oracle is forgetting how to cry." Chapter 2. The root binder sought out the Oracle alone. She carried no torch, only a satchel of bones wrapped in stories. Each belonged to an animal wronged without apology. She laid them before the tree and sang. At first nothing stirred, then a sound, a whimper, like that of a child and a wolf entwined. The bark split, and a figure stepped forth, not human, not beast, both, eyes deep as old rivers, voice like wind through grave moss. "Why do you seek me?" it asked. "To remind you," she said, "that compassion is not weakness, it's memory." The Oracle bowed, and wept for the first time in 100 years. Chapter 3. The forest changed. Predators paused before striking. Birdsong returned at dusk. Children who entered alone came out wiser, but unscarred. The villagers grew uneasy. The others demanded the Oracle be bound, studied, controlled. The root binder refused. She disappeared one morning, her hut overtaken by vines in bloom. In her place, the Oracle stood at the village edge. It spoke not in warning, but invitation. "Come learn what you forgot." And slowly they did. They sat beside squirrels without cages, learned patience from spiders, trust from strays. And when the first festival of fur and feather was held, the Oracle placed a stone in the circle. Hardened heart is only a wound that forgot how to cry. And beneath it, kindness returns when you listen to the pause beside you. Title: The War with Ease. Year: 183,974,358.6. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. On Station Bellatrix, time was currency. The elite bought seconds to linger and pleasure. The poor traded minutes for rations. Chronotech ruled every transaction, and temporal drift was the newest addiction. Amid this calculated chaos, the timeless child emerged, neither born nor made, but found between ticks of a halted clock. She looked no older than 12, but her gaze held centuries. She could not be rushed, nor could she be bought. Her presence disrupted the station's rhythms. Machines lagged. Alarms stunned. Schedules slipped from perfect sync. People feared her, but not because she was violent, because she didn't yield, not even for love. Watching her from the outer rings was the Wanderer who watches, a sentient observer tasked with maintaining emotional thresholds across the quadrants. They had watched rebellions crumble from too much empathy, and empires fall from too little. The child interested them because she drew lines, and dared others not to cross. Chapter 2. The Council of Flow summoned the timeless child. Why disrupt harmony? They demanded. She looked at them, slow and silent, then said, "Your harmony is imbalance, disguised as ease." They scoffed. So she stopped time for 11 seconds, just long enough for each member to see their most uncomfortable truth. When the seconds returned, no one spoke. She left without punishment. The Wanderer followed. They approached her in the fractured corridor between the temporal engines. "You resist everything. I preserve something." "What?" "Boundaries. Without them, love becomes control." He said nothing, but he stayed. Together, they moved through the matrix, not to destroy, but to interrupt. She restored lost moments to overworked staff. He whispered forgotten memories into sleeping minds. And slowly, station life shifted. People began declining meetings, setting personal sleep hours, refusing trade requests that drained their will, not with anger but with clarity. Chapter 3. The elite responded. They offered the child a palace of stillness, a corridor of infinite silence, a sanctuary with no interruptions. She declined. "To earn a victory is hard," she said, "but to keep it requires a war with ease." They laughed, then watched as her presence spread. A young technician disabled the overtime algorithm. An elder refused to renew their attention lease. A mother asked for privacy on record, and Bellatrix adjusted. The council dissolved not by force, but by fatigue, and the Wanderer who watches made one final notation in the archives. The boundary was not resistance. It was wisdom. The timeless child disappears soon after. Some say she waits in every choice to say yes too quickly. Others claim she watches clocks that try to tick too loud. But on Bellatrix, a beacon pulses once every hour with her message. To earn a victory is hard, but to keep it requires a war with ease. And with each pulse, someone pauses and chooses better. Title: The Thread Spiller. Year: Early Awakening. Author Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Nestled in the valley of Karen's Hollow, where fog clung to rooftops like unspoken questions, lived the tailor named Ailey. She stitched not just garments, but secrets, each thread a confession given freely, each cloak a vow to hold it quietly. Leaders from across the region came to her not for robes, but reassurance. But Ailey never lied. That was her power. That was her curse. In a world built on polite omissions, her honesty was dangerous. When the thorn-cloaked guide arrived, it rained for 7 days. He was to be the next High Warden, a man with bloodied hands and an ivory smile. The people feared him, yet no one spoke against his rise, except Ailey, and she said it not with banners or speeches. She embroidered the truth into his coronation cloak. Chapter 2. On the day of his ascension, he donned the cloak before thousands. The crowd gasped. Woven across the back, in silken red, were the names of villages burned under his watch, and the faces of those who vanished during his rise. The guide stood still. Ailey waited for punishment. Instead, he removed the cloak, held it high, and said, "I asked for honor, but you gave me memory." Then he put it back on, not as a garment, as an oath. The crowd did not cheer. They stood in silence. Then one voice sang, then another. It was not victory. It was healing. Chapter 3. The thorn-cloaked guide ruled differently. He welcomed dissent. He demanded minutes be made public. He asked every leader to wear a thread from Ailey's spindle, a thread tied to a truth they had denied. Some resisted. They were not removed. They were reminded. Ailey never sought power. She continued stitching behind her ring-dappled windows, refusing titles and statues. But every garment she made was worn with care, not pride. And when she passed, the hollow wept, not because she was gone, because she had never asked to stay. Her spindle was placed beneath the town's meeting hall, beside a plaque etched in gold. To choose joy in the dark is to break gravity's law. And beneath it, let your leaders rise by light, not shadow.